Jalen Brunson just scored 45 points in a road finals closeout game, tying Michael Jordan, winning the Finals MVP, and delivering the New York Knicks their first title in 53 long years. That was a sentence I did not expect to say when they were down 2-1 against the Atlanta Hawks in the opening round of the playoffs. In Game 5, New York only managed 94 points. San Antonio was playing incredible defense, and the New York Knicks could not buy a bucket. On paper, San Antonio had this game exactly where they wanted it. But Jalen Brunson delivers 45 out of their 94 points. He straight up backpacked the New York Knicks to a title to finish a closeout finals performance on the road with 45 points, 4 rebounds, 7 assists. Going 14 of 27 from the floor is just ridiculous, especially when the rest of the team combines for just 49 points. It wasn't some game where New York's offense was off the charts. This one was a rock fight, and in the biggest game of his career so far, Jalen Brunson was the one player who was able to consistently create something out of nothing, dragging his team to a win that's going to live in the minds of Knicks fans forever. When we talk about the best finals closeout performances of all time, this is easily one of the very best we've ever seen. Giannis in 2021, where he drops 50 points on the Suns, is still number one for me. Bob Pettit back in the 60s also had a 50-point finals closeout game. And then we get to Jalen Brunson, tied with Michael Jordan at 45 points. That's the rarefied air that Jalen Brunson now exists in. But the most impressive part about Brunson's run is how many questions he had to answer to even get to this stage. The doubt surrounding him was never really about his talent level, because his college days in Villanova showed us that this dude can really hoop. The question with him was always about the ceiling. Can a 6'2" guard who might actually be shorter than 6'2" really be the number one option through 4 rounds of grueling playoff basketball? Is it possible for him to be able to continue to generate great shots late in games? Can he survive the size, the pressure, the traps, the rim protection, and everything that comes with physical playoff basketball? What we just watched was the answer to all of those questions. A resounding yes. Jalen Brunson is now the best player on a championship team. He's a Finals MVP, and he's the guy that broke a 53-year championship drought. He genuinely might be the greatest playoff riser we've ever seen. Because yes, his regular season numbers since coming over from Dallas are really still quite good, averaging about 26 points a game. But in the playoffs, this dude has just evolved into a different beast every single time he steps foot on the court. Over his 4 playoff runs with the New York Knicks, he's giving them 29 points a game. Like, that is flat out MVP level production. But the question with him is usually efficiency. And even earlier in this series, San Antonio was really making him work. Through the opening 3 games, he had 82 points on 80 shots. So the points were there, but San Antonio was making him take so many shots to get there. And then San Antonio picks up the Game 3 win, and then they lead by 29 points in the third quarter of Game 4. But Jalen stepped up in the 2 biggest games of his life and averaged 40.5 points a game on 64% true shooting, shot 50% from 3, and shot 50% on his 2-point shots as well, against a team that literally makes the paint unreachable with Victor Wembanyama. That is the part that makes all of this so incredibly ridiculous. Brunson is barely 6 feet. Wembanyama is basically a whole foot taller than him, and it still didn't matter. Jalen Brunson just delivered an all-time great series, and it's the kind of a performance that's going to get brought up every single time when we talk about the greatest players in New York Knicks franchise history. And honestly, I really do think we might be at the point where Jalen Brunson has a legitimate argument to be the greatest New York Knicks player in the history of the franchise. Now, that doesn't mean mean what Walt Frazier and Willis Reed did in the 70s all of a sudden doesn't matter at all. Because don't be ridiculous. Those guys are legends, and just because it happened 50 plus years ago doesn't mean that they're not NBA champions. But what Brunson just did in the modern NBA at his size is something that we might not see again. Most people watching this were not alive when the New York Knicks won their last title, and Jalen Brunson was the guy who put an end to that wait. Whether you want to put him over Clyde or Willis right now is up for debate, but there's no question that what Jalen Brunson just did will be talked about for years to come. Now, this isn't one of the greatest teams ever if we're just looking at the roster on paper. Clearly, there are more talented teams in the history of the league that if we had to put them in a time capsule and say, New York, go ahead and play the Bulls, or go ahead and play the Warriors with Steph and KD, they probably wouldn't be the favorites to win. But if we're talking about one individual playoff run, this genuinely might be the greatest in NBA history. By playoff net rating from every champion in the last 40 years, the New York Knicks are number one, above the Warriors, above the Lakers, above the Bulls. This graph doesn't look real, like it looks like someone made a mistake, but it's real. This Knicks team wasn't just winning games on their way to a title. They were straight up ripping teams' souls out. Whenever the New York Knicks got hot offensively, I straight up don't think there's a team in NBA history that could have properly cooled them down. Because even when you did rotate well enough, contest the shot, and force them into different looks that you were willing to live with, they would just continue to knock down the shots anyway. Taking a look at this finals series as a whole, I think it's the best we've had since 2021. I know it only went to 5 games, but every single one of these games was an absolute banger. All of them came down to clutch time, which is something we pretty much never see. Like, if you go back and look at the 2016 finals, which is widely regarded as the best finals series ever, a lot of those games were just blowouts. And it really is Game 7 that elevates it to the cream of the crop. But this series delivered a close finish every single time. In Game 1, Jalen Brunson turns it on and drags the Knicks to a win. In Game 2, San Antonio really could have won it if Wembanyama hadn't thrown the ball off the back of Castle. Then in Game 3, San Antonio pick up the bounce back win, and through a half of basketball in Game 4, it looked like we were going back to Texas with the series tied at 2 games apiece. But then, Game 4 delivers one of the greatest games we've ever seen. A 29-point comeback in the second half, ending with the OG Anunoby tip-in. And then we get this closeout performance from Brunson. Like, this series was straight up cinema. But it wasn't just Brunson. What OG Anunoby just did in these playoffs deserves so much credit, because he's legitimately turned himself into one of the very best two-way players in basketball. He is a legit shooter now. He's one of the very best defensive players on the planet, and in my opinion, he was the second best player in this title run. OG now has more playoff points in the last 5 postseasons than Joel Embiid, Giannis, Kevin Durant, and Anthony Davis. And again, that stat doesn't sound like it's real, but that's just how good OG has been. He's no longer just a 3-and-D role player. He is legitimately built for the big time moments. And whenever New York's offense was grinding to a halt and someone had to make shots, it was always him keeping them afloat. Karl-Anthony Towns also deserves some flowers, because this series was definitely not perfect from him. But across the playoffs as a whole, he played the best defense of his life and was critically important to the floor spacing and the overall offensive cohesion of this New York team. With Towns, the story is way bigger than just basketball. This was a guy who was rear-ended by a semi-truck and was given a 5% chance to live. Then, years later, he loses his mother to COVID, loses 7 other family members to COVID, gets the virus himself, and loses 50 pounds during the recovery. Then, on top of all of that, he got hit by a drunk driver in LA and ends up hospitalized overnight. Like, this isn't normal adversity. That's a ridiculous amount of suffering for one person to deal with, and if anybody deserved to have a moment like this, becoming an NBA champion, being one of the more important players on your team, it was Cat. Then you get to Mikal Bridges, and this was a guy who really played horribly through the first 5 games of the Hawks series. People were looking back at the trade where New York gave up 5 first-round picks to get him, and he was copping a lot of heat online. But from game 6 of the first round onwards, he barely missed a shot, stepping in and really giving this New York team the added defense and shooting that they really needed. And at the end of the day, F those picks. But on the Spurs side, they should not walk away from this series feeling like they're miles away. Yeah, they lost the series in 5, but all of those games were in the clutch. And really, that's insane. San Antonio had real chances to win this series. And if this was a version of the Spurs even 2 years from now, where they're a little older and maybe De'Aaron Fox isn't on the team, I really do think they could have won this. Dylan Harper is going to be a superstar. I feel more than comfortable saying that, because at 20 years of age in his first season, he was able to stand up in every round of these playoffs, delivering amazing production off the bench to the point where he really should have been the starting point guard by the end of it. Stephon Castle is a stud as well, and he's only going to continue to improve. And of course, we all know how ridiculously good Victor Wembanyama is at the game of basketball. Like, this Spurs team is going to be a problem for years to come. So if there was ever going to be a year to beat the San Antonio Spurs, this was the opportunity, and the New York Knicks took full advantage. And thank you to anybody who watched my videos during this playoff run. It genuinely means the world to me, and this was one of the best playoff runs that I've been around to experience, and I'm not stopping the train now. We'll be rolling all off season long, covering the trades, draft selections, and looking forward to next season. But as of right now, New York just completed one of the greatest playoff runs of all time. And for the first time since 1973, the New York Knicks are champions of the world.